Hello and what's up everybody, it's Thunderbob here, and I am checking out some more Diablo 2 Resurrected tonight. I am playing a Fire Trap Assassin. What I've been doing lately is I've been going through the builds that have seen some substantial changes with the patch and testing them out at the very high end. Basically, the purpose of this is to see at the very high end how they perform against existing builds. So I've got build videos for almost every build out there on my channel. And I want to compare at the very high end, how does, a Fire Trap Assassin, how does the new Hydra, how does the change to Druid, how do they compete against those existing builds? I will later do some kind of mid-range gear, but at the moment I'm going with pretty high end. This Fire Trap Assassin I've messed around with, and it is decent. At the lower player difficulties, I think it might actually be better than the Lightning Trap Assassin, but I don't think it scales quite enough to be effective at the higher player difficulties. This build is basically built around Wake of Fire and somewhat Wake of Inferno. We'll get into that. I'll go through the build and the gear here. So 20 in Wake of Inferno, 20 in Wake of Fire, 20 in Fire Blast. And then I've got 1 point in Burst of Speed. With Burst of Speed, I'm hitting the max breakpoint on laying traps. And then 1 point down to Mind Blast, just a nice 1 point skill. I am not using a claw, you'll probably notice, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. So no weapon block, and I'm not getting down to your warrior or your master just because I don't want more distractions on the screen. You might go with that, but it's not really useful at this high of gear level, I find. I put 20 in Death Sentry just for that corpse explosion. It's still useful, though the lightning damage isn't great. And then the remaining points I started putting into the lightning synergies for Death Sentry, just to increase its damage a little bit. And that's where we're at here. So to talk about how effective it is, Wake of Fire, the average damage here is like 1500. And I know from I've got a Lightning Trap Assassin on BattleNet that's pretty well geared, not quite this level, but it's close. And I want to see the average damage on Lightning Sentry on that character that's not even fully geared out is like 10,000 damage. And the average damage here is, a tenth of that. And I know this covers a wider area, but it doesn't cover as much distance. But I still think this could probably increase in damage. And what they did with the patch is they removed a couple of synergies from the lightning. So like Lightning Sentry, you no longer need to max Death Sentry. But for a Lightning Trap Assassin, you're probably maxing Death Sentry anyways. So that change didn't make a ton of sense. But they increased the corresponding synergies to make up for that missing synergy. So these didn't really have a net gain in damage, though you have one less synergy you have to go with. Fire, though, they removed a synergy from Wake of Inferno. You don't need... so they removed the Death Sentry synergy from Wake of Inferno, and then they increased the corresponding synergies, but they increased them more than that. I want to say it was like 10%. So like that's, when you get 20 points in your synergies, that's a pretty substantial amount of increase. Same with Wake of Fire. They didn't remove a synergy here, but they did increase each of those from 8 to 10%. So you're talking about a pretty decent bump up in damage. And I think at the lower player difficulties, it's definitely noticeable. But at the higher player difficulties, the damage on it just isn't there to compete with Lightning Sentry. But we're going to go through. I actually think at the lower difficulties, Wake of Fire actually can beat the speed on Lightning Sentry just because of how much coverage it has, how big of an area it covers. I'll look at the gear real quick here. I'm using Heart of the Oak, which I didn't have any good claws. This is a PTR, and actually this is a single player character. I just didn't have any claws handy. So it's a little unorthodox. Usually you'd use like +6 claws, which are super expensive for the very, very high end. Well, I got Heart of the Oak. I got a Shaco with a Fire Facet. Mara's Enigma for the teleport. Spirit. Silkweave. Actually, I should probably change those out, but the +5 mana is pretty nice for this. SOJ, Arachnids. Mage Fist. With Mage Fist, I've got enough FCR to hit, was it the 106 breakpoint, I think it is? And with this setup, I'm hitting the maximum trap laying speed. And then I got just a mishmash of trap charms down here and some crazy 25 single small charms. Yeah, so very expensive on the charms and Enigma, of course, and then I'm using Infinity. So this is very, very high-end gear here. And we're going to see how effective it is in cows. I'm going to start off by showing the player 1 cows, and then I'm going to bump it up as I go, just to kind of show you where it starts to fall off a little bit. Though Death Sentry does kind of make up for it the same way on a cow, on a necro, how corpse explosion kind of makes up for some of their other shortcomings. And like in player 1 difficulty, it just kind of rips through them. Though you do have to micromanage them a little bit more because your traps only last 5 shots instead of 10. So like, it's, you know, a little bit more micromanaging. And you kind of got to keep them in those flames. I'm still so used to the lightning, but it comes to you pretty quick. And there it is, they all went down so fast. So like at this difficulty, I'd say the damage is pretty decent. Is it competing with a Lightning Fury Amazon? No. Is it competing with Blizzard? Is it competing with Lightning Trap? But if I just throw in one Death Sentry here, the damage goes up exponentially too. So like, that's one reason why Lightning is so good. So you do get that benefit here. So drop 4 of them. Once the first enemy dies, they all die. Yeah. So the thing is, at the higher difficulties, the damage on your traps, I think, just isn't quite there. And we'll go ahead and bump this up to players 8 here. Let's see, where have I not triggered? Probably over here. I see, I'll know right away. I think that is still player 1. Yeah, that's... No, I think that's still player 1. Yeah, that's player 8. And it's like, I have to recast, because they only last 5. And I still haven't had my first kill yet. But there I did, and then Death Sentry taking care of everything. So that's kind of the problem, is the Lightning Sentries just deal that much more damage to kill your first guy and then trigger your Death Sentry. Whereas here, it's just not... In player 8 difficulty, I think it's just not quite there. But watch, once that first guy goes down, then they're all dead. So, at the lower difficulties, I could definitely see this being competitive. At player 8 difficulty, I don't think it quite competes with Lightning Trap still. There is an area where I think it's kind of fun, and that's bosses. Your Wake of Inferno does pretty good damage. So I'm going to do like a quick Mephisto run, just to show that off. Okay, so just to show you how this works on a boss, which it's still, I wouldn't say the most, like, the quickest in the world, but it's pretty good. You know, like, a couple of seconds there. So, Wake of Inferno is a decent boss killer. Gonna use Wake of Fire mostly to get through the big packs of enemies, and then Wake of Inferno when you get to the bosses. And then you got Death Sentry to help deal with those big packs of enemies as well. I think it's an alternative to Lightning if you're looking for something different. I still think Lightning edges out Fire Trap a bit. It just does a little bit more damage. There's also a lot more fire immunes, like Chaos Sanctuary, run into a lot of them in Bale. But with some of those new level 85 areas, there's a lot of areas you could run this build and be effective. But if you want to do like some of the big boss runs, I would probably stick to Trap Assassin or different build altogether. I'm going to end it here. If you like this video, I have a ton of other Diablo Resurrected content, a ton of other 2.4 builds. Check some of it out. If you enjoy it, please do consider giving me a like and a subscribe. Thank you again for watching, and have a great night.